Yeah, I mean, so these are really big, heavy words, and they bring back they have a lot of baggage associated because
Would
of
like to
course.
see you in the video. I am not able to see you for some reason.
My video is on.
Is that right? Is everybody able to see? Yes, now I can see.
All
Okay.
right, great. I just started and stopped. So, like you said, Karthi, these words decolonization, colonization, heritage, these are heavy terms. They bring a lot of baggage along with it. And
Oh,
so
yes.
I just want to step back for a minute and do a little thought experiment. Uh, and I'd like to just pull some visuals up. So I'm going to share my screen.
Absolutely. Designer's haven. Go for it.
All right. So, all right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Um, so back in school, we 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 would all recall studying about the wonders of the world, seven wonders. I think some people say there are eight wonders, that there were wonders of the ancient world. Then 2007, UNESCO came up with a new list, seven wonders of the modern world, and so on. And we all know what they are. I mean, these are grand monuments of human achievement. I mean, there's a Taj Mahal in there, Great Wall of China's in there, pyramids are in there. And I was talking about this with my team here at Zeux, and we thought, okay, what would the list of the seven wonders of the design world look like? Just as an exercise, what would you put in that list of the wonders of the design world, whether it's seven or eight or how many? What comes to mind? And we did this little exercise, and uh, you know one of the first things we noticed was that it's very hard to actually think of the design wonders of the world. And most people like just are blank for like 5 minutes and wonder what to put there. And I guess it's because good things which are well designed are designed to disappear into your life. That's why they are good, right? Because you don't have to notice them anymore. They become ubiquitous, invisible, and they just merge into your life. And it's so much so that you stop even bothering to notice that there's that thing there that you use every day. But anyway, after you put some thought into it, I'm sure each one of us would have our own list of seven, eight design wonders. And so as we put together our list, there were some things that we started putting. I mean, there was the red telephone box, which is an
Yes.
icon. There's the Converse shoes, and then again, these are a reflection of me and my team's views. These are this is by no means an authoritative list of the design wonders. So, so we put the Swiss knife in there, band-aids, very useful. I don't think most people even realized how great a design that is. Lego blocks, of course, the original
Yes.
iPhone.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, the Sony Walkman. And I mean, I had to put the post-it in there, so I ended up with eight things. But I mean, you could have, you could have many more, and you could have many different versions of this list. But as we arrived at this, we realized that a lot of what we consider design references, exemplars, wonders are largely based on things that we learned in our modern design education, based on the Bauhaus school, and a lot of our education, exposure, and experience with design comes from this reference of design that is essentially based on the Western ideology of what good design is. And by no means am I saying these are not great design examples. I think these are fantastic examples of great design. But when a designer, even in India, is asked to think of great design references, these are some of the things that they come up with. So a lot of our default thinking into what is good design comes from this background. And and of course lot of us in our design education learn what is good design, what are the principles of good design, and these are like the 9 or 10 here from Dieter Rams, The head of
Yeah.
design at Braun, and so our kind of formative years as designers really start conditioning ourselves to this. And I think in Indian terms, if I was to distill these 10, in India, subconsciously we think good design is, if I was to ask somebody to complete that sentence, I think they would
Mm-hmm.
say good design is Western,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And as we arrived at this point, I realized that it's such a subconscious thing that we don't even realize that a lot of our default assumptions about what is good design is just conditioned from a very, very early age. What does that do to our ability to design? How does that impact our design decisions when we design for India or for some other cultures? Is it the right approach, or are we designing by default? And that's where the topic for this session really came along. And then
Mm.
started thinking about what what is it really that's making us think like this? Is there like a colonization of our thought process that has
Mm.
happened? And when I say India's design heritage, a lot of people ask me, well, India, does it really have a design heritage? What
What?
do you mean? Like, India and design don't really go together in the same sentence ever. And so that started really putting me on a search for, is does India have a design heritage? Did
Mm.
it exist? Okay, if it does, what does it mean? And if I'm
Mm.
proposing an alternative to the Bauhaus school or Western ideology of design, then what's the alternative to it? Right? Is there something that you can use as a different approach? And so
So I
that's
have.
kind of how it started. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, go for it, go for it. I'm no, I just out of curiosity, my brain is going in two different directions. One is, okay, if good design is Western, then what does it mean to be Indian, or is there a difference?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it same? Is it different? Or
Yeah.
the other line of thought that I'm getting is, as we keep saying that design is human centric, it's domain agnostic. As a discipline, it's very, very inclusive. In that sense, should it be very different for the human beings? For example,
Yeah.
if you really look at nature, we all are 99% similar, probably with 1% difference in our genome, which makes us so unique.
Yeah.
So, should there be a design, language playbook, the way we look at things for India? Is there something like that, or should we treat it like blood and skeleton and
Great, question.
Ah,
great
human
question.
centricity is
Yeah.
bothering me.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So it's a fantastic question. So there is a certain universal aspect to good design. There is no question about it, right? There is a certain set of things that are universal.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, it's not that simple, because, and the proof that we all are not the same is given by the fact that there's so much conflict in this world. We all
Mm-hmm.
actually think very differently, and it's not because of our anthropology or our cognitive hardwiring, but our cultural context which makes us this. So it's that 1% that really makes a big difference, right? So there are certain universal principles, but there are certain context differences that make a big difference to how you design for one geography versus the other, one socioeconomic class versus the other, one gender versus the other. Uh, and that's not taking away from the fact that we're all human beings at underlying. Our hardwiring is the same, but
Right.
there is the cognitive similarity and the cultural difference. And I think we must celebrate both of those things and understand both those things, because and if you look at some of those examples that actually bring to light why I think that there
Mm.
is no one universal design language, right? And I've done a lot of design work for banks in India and all over the globe. But one project that I was doing for a bank in India really challenged me to think about what visual language are we really using by default without even thinking, right? If you design a bank interface for Indians that has to appeal to not just the English speaking elite, but the larger majority of Indians, then would they associate a bank branch with this icon? Is that what bank branches in India look like? Or would they think of a piggy bank as a representation of a bank account? Or the default visual for food, would it be a plate with a knife and a fork next to it? I mean, these are just things that I think a lot of us in the design profession don't really think about. It's just like a default re- reaction. Okay, you need a bank branch, just plonk a icon of the Greek pantheon there.
Mm.
Or the fact that the ladies and gents signage on toilets actually doesn't represent Indians very accurately. You know,
True.
or I mean, as a former architect, what really bothers me is the glass facade of buildings in urban India, which is so contrary to Indian climatic conditions. It's so bad for India, but it's Western. It's a default Western approach, right? So first in India, we make these glass facade buildings, which heat up our insides because they act as greenhouses in such a hot climate, and then we have to spend a whole lot to cool them down with air conditioning. So it just doesn't make sense. So that, but our day-to-day lives are filled with such examples where we've just resorted to a default approach rather than really questioning, does this make sense here?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I get the something that you said beautifully, cognitive similarity and cultural difference. This is just hitting me. So let's not bother about the 99%. We'll talk about that 1% genome. So
Okay.
what would be that playbook that Saurabh will say, okay, this is what India should kind of consider, and how is it very different from the Western playbook? If you can give us some details,
Sure,
anecdotes,
sure,
examples.
sure, Karthi. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say I have a playbook. I think we need one. I think we need to invent one. We need to maybe seek one. I think I have the beginnings of maybe some thought there. And, there are
Oh,
some things that are really unique to our country. Some things that will only be found here. You'll only see here as behavior, as cultural context situations. I mean, this particular picture, it just always fascinates me when I see this on the road, right? Because it says so many things about us
yes.
as people, our motivations, our pluralistic this
The level
mindset.
of
Uh,
trust to put my leg
yeah, I
on
mean,
it.
it's just amazing, right? What that teaches, that picture teaches us about designing for this cultural context. So what is the alternative? How should we? Is there a design framework? Well, first off, let me just answer the question. There is 5,000-year-old design heritage in this country. It's just that it's been relegated to the arts and craft and monument category, and it's fine from a library sciences categorization standpoint. I think it's useful from that standpoint, but I think it's unfair because it basically makes designers not consider this incredible body of work spanning so many centuries that is there for us as reference to see how people in this cultural context were thinking about design, about
Mm,
designing for people. And it's this, on the surface it looks like there cannot be any one thought process here because it all looks so different, right? You go
mm,
the north, you go to the south, it's all different. You go to the west, and it's everything is different. There's seemingly no underlying pattern, and my effort really has been to find this deeper nuance of what is common across all of this, which will maybe give us the beginnings of maybe a playbook. So
mm.
what are some of those patterns? And I see these patterns in some things that I truly considered India centered in, the Habitat Center in Delhi, Laurie Baker's architecture, the Rock Garden, even Amul, the way it's set up, or Amar. So these are some of the examples. But without getting into these, I think it's much better if I get into, so what are those things? Those for now, I'm just going to call them the seven fundamentals, right?
Brilliant.
Okay, so the first one is this, what I call the linear
Mm,
versus secular. And I don't want to use the word versus. This is not a competition, right? The thing is, in language, you can only understand one thing in comparison to another, but this is not a comparison. It's just
Mm.
two different approaches. So on the one hand, there's a linear approach that is part of everyday life in a lot of Western society. And if you can see, as an analogy of food, you can see how typical Western meal is laid out. It's very linear. Starts from, you can't start with dessert. In a fine dine restaurant, they might throw you out. You
Mm-hmm.
can't say, "Oh, I want a little bit less masala in my entree, and I want the main course as the first thing." You can't do that. Everybody gets the same dish. It's laid out the same way. The sequence is the same, and it's very linear.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to that, in an Indian thali, you can start from anywhere. It's circular. With every bite, I can decide how much of what I want. So it's personalization heaven in some sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody makes eating of that thali a personalized experience, and that just fascinates me, right? How personalization has always been part of this culture,
Now that
in
I think
this.
about it, we can start with the sweet or an end with the sweet.
Yeah, exactly. There are no rules per se. You can start anywhere, end anywhere. I eat as much of as anything you want, and in whatever sequence. So
Wow,
it's fascinating
that's
that way.
fascinating.
So there's this one aspect that really stood out to me. The second
Mm-hmm.
aspect, and I think this is one of those principles that gets talked about a lot in design, is this idea of less is more. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
as a general thumb rule to creating things that are easy to use and less and not so overwhelming, less is more. And the Scandinavian approach, the minimalist approach, is of course it's the one of the bedrock principles.
Mm-hmm.
But can you really apply that as a blanket rule in the Indian context? You can't. I remember testing a design for a client in several cities in tier one and tier two and tier three. And it was a very minimal kind of Scandinavian approach to design, lots of white space. Of course, everybody in Mumbai loved it. But as I went to like Surat and other small towns, they were like, where is the rest of the design? They thought that it was empty or some mistake has happened. And it made me think that there is no one right answer to what's the aesthetic that works here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our cultural context makes us want abundance because we've had a lot longer time living in scarcity. And so how do you create this more is more effect, create the effect of abundance without creating clutter? I think is the real challenge whenever I've designed for India, especially B2C. It's been that interesting challenge. And so this is one difference that I come across a lot on
Now
a
that you
day-to-day basis.
talk about it, yeah, vibrance. Look at all our the South Indian temples, gopurams. They are so intricate, and there is more and more and more. If you just go and read the details, yeah, it was never less, right? Oh
Yeah,
my. Okay, okay.
yeah, yeah.
I'm excited. Tell me more.
Yes, there is more. So number three, and again, form follows function is like something we wrote learn as designers, right? Form follows
Mm,
function, and that's kind of related to the previous one because you use form as a derivative of function. Thereby, you only are left with what is absolutely required. So there is no unnecessary ornamentation, fluff. Everything that's not required is thrown away, kind of, and you're left with just the most essential. And that's the basic philosophy around which Bauhaus was built, right? But I think in India, a lot of our very deep-seated cultural traditions don't really follow that. I don't think if you look at our day-to-day rituals, marriage, birth, death, I don't think we are very function focused. We are feeling focused, and sometimes we just do things because they are. We just do them. Nobody knows why, but we do them, right? And I think the focus really is on, okay, it creates a certain kind of emotion. It's part of our ritualistic understanding, and so we can't really go and approach Indian situations with a very matter of fact form follows
mm,
function mindset. I don't think it'll be accepted. So we need that bit of that emotional feeling orientation, more so than anywhere else. I think in a German context, in a Japanese context, I think the form follows function philosophy would work. But in India, I think you need a bit of that masala, you know,
Yeah,
along.
yeah. Look how we select our saris. The form is the same. Damn, the
Yeah,
function is also the same. But
yeah,
look at
yeah,
the variety that we go through.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And this fourth one was really something that came to me because I'm also a musician. I've been playing for a good 30 years now. Also, I mean, I'm a guitarist, but I've explored all genre of music. I used to be part of an Indian classical orchestra. I've been part of Western bands, and I listen to both with equal passion. And as I've been part of both things, I've realized some of the core differences that this really represents in Western and Indian design approaches. So if you listen to an Indian classical performance, no two performance will ever be the same of the same rug,
Yeah.
because nobody is reading the music. There's a
Mm.
basic melody, and everybody is free to explore all aspects of the melodic framework in whatever way you want. So the musician really says, okay, how am I feeling today? Okay, I'll play it this way today. And then there'll be a dialogue between somebody, and the nature of that dialogue will depend on that day. Versus if you attend a philharmonic like orchestra performance, it's precise. Everybody gets
Same.
a certain written down piece. You can't go one note here or there. It's just a reductionist approach. Everything is broken down. It's like a machine, that
Mm.
arrangement. And both are amazing. I mean, some of the
True.
stuff that I've heard on the Western classical side is just mind-boggling. But it's just as mind-boggling on the Indian side. It's a different approach, right? There's not so much focus on precision. It's more around improvisation,
Mm.
around approximation. So what does this mean for design in India, right? If you're supposed to, let's say, do an information architecture, should you be really precise? Should everything fall into its own silo? I don't think that works here.
Wow. Okay. All
And
right.
then, of course, we see that in other places as well. In the way the traffic moves here, how everything is like so kind of seamlessly. I'm not trying to make chaos look exotic. I mean, there is obviously, if you're in that traffic, you realize that it's not pleasant. But I'm not having a debate
Hey.
on pleasantness. I'm having a debate on a different approach, right? It's a different approach. It's not good or bad. It's just that I find, as I step back, I think when you step back from that traffic, you can actually analyze it without stressing out. And when you step back, you realize it's actually very inclusive, our traffic. There's a cow in there, there's somebody on 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels, slow moving, fast moving. It's like all types, shapes, and sizes. But
Yeah.
if you run a road on the west, everything is exactly the same. It's categories, control, boundaries, lanes. And if that doesn't tell
Mm.
us anything about the population and our cultural context, then I don't know what else will. It's all around us. It's you just have to look, right?
Mm.
And I think that also brings us to the point that we are so diverse. Designing for India is probably one of the hardest things a designer can do, because there is no one size fits all. You take a train ticket in the US or in Europe, you maybe have like two types. There's a coach class and a
Right.
business class. That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
try rambling through the different types of classes in the Indian railways, and it's head spinning. I don't even know what some of these mean. And that's the kind of diversity a designer in India has to deal with. And that's why I love designing here, because I think it's if a designer essentially looks for problems and looks for challenges, you can't find them anywhere else but here. The kinds of challenges that you
Yeah.
need to design for, and the kinds of cultural diversity, language diversity, economic diversity, it's just amazing. And finally, I felt that And I've seen this across generations. I mean,
Classic.
more so
Mm.
in my parents. Like, we have a hard time throwing away things. We just, I think our very nature are very kind of sustainable in that sense. I don't think we were thinking about it from a sustainability standpoint, but we like to get the maximum value for our money. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not like, okay, iPhone 10, my iPhone 10 is brand new, iPhone 11 is here, okay, let me just throw this iPhone 10, right? Maybe some people are starting to do that, but it's not part of our natural default. I think, once the shirt gets used, then it becomes the t-shirt, then the t-shirt becomes the pocha, and the pocha becomes the car washing cloth, and it has a, we like to take things through that life cycle.
True.
And
True.
so this
Very true.
tendency to repair, restore, recycle is very much part of our everyday.
Just by listening to the fundamentals, Saurabh, I feel that I'm not alone. I mean, I used to keep feeling that, oh my God, designing for India, am I actually breaking away from everything that I learned from Western schools? Well, I learned my graduation is from the West, so you can imagine. So I had this constant fight. So today you made Jugalbandi feel awesome, you know, not throwing away stuff and reusing, and not calling it as recycling, sustainability, not giving any of those names, but just it's our nature. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a hard time throwing away anything, and having a clean space is not our way of looking at it. So it's very, very stark, the way you brought the
Yeah.
difference between India versus what we have learned as design outside. I'm less guilty now. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthi. And I think, to the uninitiated, to somebody looking at us from the surface, it's very easy to rubbish us off as chaotic. Oh,
Hmm.
this is such chaos, and that's a very shallow way of looking at things, right? I think designers, more than anyone, needs to have a much more deeper, nuanced view of why we are the way we are. What is
Yeah.
it really that makes us behave the way we do? How is
Mm.
that different? And it's not about trying to portray a superiority or a nationalistic bias or patriotism of some sort. I have no interest in that. My only interest is to deliver the best outcome of a design, and the best outcome takes the best approach, right? So whatever approach is the most effective, if the Western approach is more effective, please by all means use it, but don't use
Mm.
it as a default. Consider all approaches. Start with asking the question, is this really the right approach, or could there be
Mm.
something else? So it's about adding
Mm.
another perspective to your toolkit, and choose want this to
Absolutely.
become a discussion about, oh, this is, we are superior, and this is a nationalistic it's movement to everything Indian is good. No, it's not that at all. I don't want this to be mistaken as that.
Oh,
uh,
that's well said. So I keep getting this question, especially with this IPL season. My kids ask me, which team are you supporting? What is your patriotism like? I'm like, whoever plays well. I don't care, right? Whichever game is interesting, and that's what we should be looking at. So it's a very, very that's a nice final touch to it. It's not about Bharat, it's not about India, it's all about culture, context, relevance, and what we are getting used to. You can't show someone who is so used to a forest, a garden, and say this is what it should be looking like.
yes.
I totally appreciate what you have said. So now that you yourself said that it's very hard to design for India, then how should we think about design? How do
Yeah.
we think about design decisions for India? Because
Sure.
as designers, I don't think there is no playbook, and I don't think we are making those decisions in that direction
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. I think if we can just start being aware that we need a different playbook, I think that will be the first step towards getting there. So, how will this understanding that we need to think differently maybe impact our design decisions? And I want to just put a few kind of questions as food for thought to plant these seeds. And so when I say we are more is more, right? A very clear example of that is when I walk into a kirana store in India. There is something I call a kirana store aesthetic. Everything is like bursting out of the seams. There is not a single place that is not used to display something. It's sachets hanging from the top. You by no means can you look at this and call this less is more, right? But when you approach a store like this and you get this subconscious feeling of abundance, you want to buy from here, right? Imagine if he threw away half of those things, you'd be like, what's wrong with this store? Is he even doing well? Does he have stuff? So would a minimal design approach appeal to an Indian audience? The next time you're thinking of a visual style or visual approach, think of that. What would make sense? Of course, it has to be about the audience. Who's your audience? What kind of persuasion principles would work in a culture that is based on infinite lives, right? We're not just one life culture where we get born, we live out our life, and we die, and then you go to heaven or hell. We're about birth, rebirth, and the cycle continues, and at some point you kind of take the exit from the freeway, so to speak, called moksha. So if this is our subconscious context, what matters to us really in the deepest levels? How do you persuade? What kind of motivation works here? And finally, this thought of that we talked about, improvisations versus precision. How would you organize a content in a culture that's driven more by estimation, approximations, improvisation? You don't want hard silos, hard boundaries. It's loose, it's flexible. And if there's one thing I'd like people to take away from this session, is actually three things. First, challenge your assumptions about good design. There is no default answer of what good design is. Develop a questioning attitude towards that. Two, the best way to do that is whenever you start a design interventions, always start with, I have no idea how to do this. Start with, I don't know. If you start with I don't know, you will bother to seek the answer. If you start with I know, then it's already done, right? Then you've already lost the battle. And then just observe without the masala of your own biases, without think, oh, this is chaos. Oh, this is Indians are like this. Don't do that. Just observe. Just suspend your judgment. And I think if we do these three things, we'll probably arrive at a playbook at some point. But I'm scared about having a static playbook. I think playbook is something that should be constantly evolving. It should be dynamic. It should be a living organism. There should be no It's like you can't, if you put culture, document it into a book, it dies, right? So I would rather not have a documented, fixed, static playbook somewhere, but an appreciation that there is a different approach that we must constantly evolve and improve and seek to understand. So yeah, that's really what I think we need to do.
Yeah, my 20 years of career guilt got washed away in just 1 hour. Thank you. Thank you, Saurabh.
Okay.
So when I worked in the West, I used to say, they used to call something like planning meetings. And I used to say, let's start doing and we will figure it out on the go. And they're like, are you crazy? But that's how we do. We are not precision oriented in the beginning, slowly. And now they're talking about MVPs. And I'm like, this is what my grandmother does. Not one day her recipes were the same. So it's like continuous experimentation. So that's what I'm saying. You just washed away the guilt. this is this is awesome. I have two questions from the audience because we have only 5 minutes left. So the first question is, do you believe it is because that we are not aware of our history in a proper way that we don't know how to design for using our heritage, our past? Is that why? I mean,
I think it's a lot to do with our schooling. I think especially the English-speaking elite in this country we have an English education, which means all of our concepts, our ideas, our philosophies are largely westernized. I mean, let's accept it. We don't read Indian philosophy. We don't read Indian authors. We just, and so when our upbringing is like that, and when I went to NID, my design education was based on all of this, or on Bauhaus, on the Western idea of what is good design. And so it just becomes our default response. And I think it's very hard for us to have grown up in that culture to then suddenly step back and think, maybe I'm missing something. Did we miss out learning about our own heritage and our own, maybe, design framework? So I think it's that. I think it's our conditioning from our education.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yes, you're right. We learned all the basics. One is the Lord Ram of design is Dieter Ram. So, so.
Oh my God, that's quite a statement. Yeah, it could get you into
So
trouble.
I know, I know. This is all only designers, so I can speak this stuff. Would you recommend Indian, because we are working with a lot of foreign countries, their products. Look at it today, IKEA, McDonald's, everything is India, and they have added a paneer patty and, a welcome mat, things like that. So is there any recommendation or a process, a framework to design in India? I mean, it could be anybody for that matter, but because it is designed for Indians, is there anything that we can follow?
Yeah, I would just say that first off, I think let's not think that the Scandinavian aesthetic is the aesthetic that works here. It doesn't. So a lot of designers tend to love white space, and I love it too. I mean, as a kind of designer, I've always loved Apple products and Dieter Rams, and but it's been a humbling experience designing in India for the last 15 years and knowing that everybody doesn't share my aesthetic sensibilities. So let's not, be so arrogant about, oh, I'll teach these natives what is aesthetics. No, let's understand what their aesthetic sensibilities are. And let's be truly user centered in that sense. We're not trying to civilize anybody. We're trying to create things that best suit their needs. And in that sense, I think if we can just focus on and stepping away from our design pedestal, and kind of get down to the ground and
So
see the world from.
yeah, we started with human centric, and I think we have come one full round. Finally, we are saying that keep this human at the center, make sure all the context and the relevance is taken care, and then go and design. There is nothing like default that you need to start with.
Yes.
This has been fabulous, Saurabh. I learned so much today, and I think I'll be guilt free. Probably I should have an ice or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you
It's my
so
pleasure.
much for sharing your
My
wisdom with
absolute
us.
pleasure.
I know. Did we overshoot Nishita on the time or anything like that?
We're actually right on time, ma'am. A big
On
thank you to
time.
you and
Yay.
Hey, that's not very Indian. We have to be late, right? We're not precise. No, I'm just kidding. I think those things we should do.
no, no, sir. The session was super engaging. It was really nice to hear you.
Thank you.
A big thank you to our attendees for joining us, and a special thanks to our sponsors and partners: Human Factors International, Adobe, Facebook, UNICEF, Catalonia Trade and Investment, Litmus Inc. Our supporters. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.